Welcome everyone to the Hurting Humanity channel. If you haven't heard, there is a deadly mosquito virus on the East Coast that they're claiming is spreading to other states, and conveniently, they're also asking people out there, despite having no symptoms from getting bit by the mosquito other than maybe itching, which used to be the most common side effect of getting bit by a mosquito, but these days we know that they use these mosquitoes as syringes, which is why Bill Gates and a lot of these billionaires just seem to have their hand in every single thing that affects our day-to-day lives. That's why they're, working on sending out GMO mosquitoes in states like Texas and Florida, and have been for years. But we know they're using mosquitoes as syringes. And we also know that they're dumping and breeding these mosquitoes from the sky, which I'll get into later in the video. But if you haven't heard, this is what's going on. These mosquitoes now are spreading Eastern equine encephalitis virus, EEE it's called. There's no symptoms to worry about, but what they want you to do is, this is how psychoses work, is when you hear the propaganda, especially now because people are just living in fear, they want to make sure one of the things you do to comply is to voluntarily lock yourselves inside. Stay inside. You see where this theme is going with lockdowns and curfews? This is very important, and this plays into the carbon footprint that I've been talking about for years. The carbon footprint, you will be living as a prisoner. All these things that are going on are preparation for that. They continually are conditioning people, and the more they do this, into locking themselves inside, so it's not even a big deal anymore. So they're of course saying it's voluntary lockdown, but we know what that means because it was supposed to be voluntary to get vaccinated, right? And when they tell you it's voluntary, what they do is then, of course, shame you if you don't follow their voluntary demands. It's very interesting to watch how all this stuff has happened, right? How all of these people don't even realize that they're communist foot soldiers, that they say everything's voluntary, then they shame you into obeying their rules. So in other words, if you go out after curfew, which is voluntary, you will be probably shamed by your community for being selfish, for going out after curfew. Don't worry about questioning whether it's real or not. That's not allowed. You got to believe everything you hear, and then you have to listen, but you do it for the betterment of your community, right? Listen to what's going on in America on the East Coast. This is happening in Massachusetts.
Towns and cities across the country are now on alert for mosquito-borne illnesses, including the rare Eastern equine encephalitis virus. Plymouth, Massachusetts is closing parks and fields at dusk. Other towns are urging people to avoid going outdoors at night during those hours of peak mosquito activity. More now from ABC's Ike Ajanci.
Tonight, during the final weeks of summer, Plymouth, Massachusetts, south of Boston, closing its parks and fields from dusk till dawn. One of 10 communities in the state where families are at high or critical risk for becoming infected with the Eastern equine encephalitis virus, a rare but potentially deadly mosquito-borne illness.
Key thing is there's no vaccines or treatment for triple E, so prevention is really very critical.
Starting this week, crews will spray for mosquitoes from the ground and from the air in more than a dozen towns. The CDC says although most people who get the triple E virus have no symptoms, a small percentage develop brain inflammation, and about a third of those people will die. And many survivors suffer long-term neurologic damage. In 2019, the threat of the triple E virus impacted Friday night lights in multiple states. Connecticut's Windsor High School among those rescheduling their football games and other outdoor activities to before dusk to limit exposure to mosquitoes. That year, there were more than 36 cases of human triple E virus across 10 states in the U.S., the highest on record. At least 12 people died. And in New York City, crews spraying in Manhattan and Brooklyn this week to combat another mosquito-borne illness, the West Nile virus. Dr. Anthony Fauci among those in the U.S. now recovering from that virus. Mary, officials say be vigilant about practicing protective behaviors. Use repellents with EPA-registered active ingredients. When outdoors, wear clothing that covers the skin and reschedule outdoor activities to avoid the hours between dusk and dawn.
So how interesting, right? There's a lot of things to look at there. The curfew is one of them. The no symptoms is the other. Of course, there's no vaccine for this as well. They'll tell everyone out there. So anybody out there who's a conspiracy theorist, they'll go, oh, well, see, it's not about getting you vaccinated. This is a real story. They don't even think to themselves that the mosquitoes are actually flying syringes, because they are. But let's talk about the curfew for a second. Like I said earlier, how they make this stuff voluntary, right? Does anybody remember when we had the COVID lockdowns and what the curfew was even about? What is it not? Does it spread more at night than during the day? They just came up with this whole curfew thing because this is what the future looks like, and they're conditioning you into it. They had the effective nighttime curfew of COVID-19, so we all needed to find a safe haven, quarantine when the sun went down. We all know that stores were closing, like Home Depot would close at 6 o'clock at night. We know restaurants weren't even allowed to be open, right? The grocery store would close at sundown. And now, of course, these are other things that they're easing people into because the future is dusk till dawn in your cell, just like a prisoner, right? What's even more interesting about it is, maybe I'm speaking out of place here because I'm not an expert on mosquitoes, but my common sense meter tells me that aren't mosquitoes at night relatively like not as active as they are during the day? Don't mosquitoes rest at night? Now, that doesn't mean that you won't find mosquitoes out at night. We've all been outside at night and got bit by mosquitoes, but not as much as the day, right? So why is it at night? Why are people just told to stay inside during the day? You got to also love how this isn't just for right now. This is until first frost. So they're telling you to stay locked down and do this from dusk till dawn until October at the earliest when the first frost comes, which usually does not come on the East Coast in October. It usually comes in November. It can come in October, but we're talking about at least a month and a half to 2 months of people who are going to be voluntarily locking themselves inside because of fear of getting bit by mosquitoes without asking any questions about, hey, wait a minute, how come these guys like Bill Gates have all these patents and are talking about creating GMO mosquitoes to send out into other countries? Hey, wait a minute, wasn't it Bill Gates who was talking about production of a transgenic mosquito as a flying syringe to deliver protective vaccines to people via mosquito so mosquitoes could bite people and vaccinate them? No way they would try to do something like that. Now, if you understand all of this with nanotechnology and what they're trying to get inside your body, of course, this has nothing to do with protecting you from any type of an outbreak out there. All this has to do with, of course, is getting nanotech directly into your blood by getting mosquitoes injected with this nanotechnology and then creating them in a laboratory and sending them out in mass, right? Dumping them out of chemtrails, dumping them out of the sky. Really, they could dump these things out of jets and nobody says anything about it. So shouldn't people out there start connecting the dots? I know it's a very difficult time period for people to critically think because people are so dumb. But when you have a guy like Bill Gates who is front and center, who's supposedly a tech guy, right? Then he becomes front and center for vaccines. You connect the dots yet with technology, with Microsoft and vaccines. And then what he's working on now is carbon vacuum, sucking the carbon out of the air. Big advocate of climate change, telling us that we don't need to have cows anymore. We need to eat plant-based, get estrogen in our bodies. And at the same time, he's developing mosquito vaccines, to help humanity. Nobody's suspicious yet, right? And now on top of that, this is what maybe might be most concerning to me about this, is I'm not saying that this isn't real. I'm not saying that this virus, that the mosquitoes aren't actually there. Of course, we know they're using the propaganda to condition you, to make you fearful, to make people voluntarily lock themselves in, because this new world order is going to be based on a lot of people voluntarily doing this stuff. That's what just happened with COVID. There were no laws in place that told you couldn't do this or do that. They tried to tell us that some, governors were signing this and signing that. But if the people rose up and everybody went against it and said, we're not staying inside, what were they going to do? Arrest the entire state, arrest the entire country, arrest the entire earth? No, they weren't going to. So it is psychological, right? But we know people will voluntarily, through fear, give up their rights. And what concerns me here is this. State officials are announcing plans to spray for mosquitoes in sections of Worcester and Plymouth counties due to EE. So they're going to be spraying from the skies, which tells me that they're likely going to actually be dropping mosquitoes from the skies. And in fact, some of the stuff that's going to be getting sprayed is not going to be helpful to getting rid of mosquitoes. It's actually going to be harmful to human beings, right? They're going to be spraying chemicals from the sky. Now, we know we get morning, afternoon, and evening baths from our government via chemtrails and geoengineering, but for them to come in and say, well, state officials are announcing plans to spray for mosquitoes. So they're going to spray chemicals in the sky. What are the effects of that? Are they going to announce what the effects of that are? Are they just going to say, hey, stay inside on Wednesday and Thursday because we'll be spraying? What if somebody is outside when these chemicals are getting dumped onto civilians? Who is giving these people the authority to do this? Nobody. They're taking the authority, pretending that they're elected, pretending that we put them in power and they're doing what's best for us. And all they're doing, in addition to enslaving us, is killing us, dumping chemicals on us, poisoning us, unleashing mosquito syringes on us, right? And keep in mind, too, another thing you could look at with this, and I've covered this a million times, and my videos are on the website here on Plum Island. But Plum Island is only 95 miles away from this location in Massachusetts, okay? 95 miles. Now, Plum Island did say that they left that location and went, I believe it's Kansas that they claim to be in now. But they have many of these Plum Island-like locations where they claim that, they're animal disease centers, right? That's what Plum Island, we were told. Plum Island is an animal disease center. Then you look at some of the pictures of these mutated dogs and all types of animals that we've never seen before, just showing up on beaches right off of, the coast there, off of the East Coast. And they go, well, we're doing animal disease, testing over there to prevent any of this stuff. And of course, they're creating it because that's where Lyme's disease was created. For anybody out there that doesn't know, it came directly from Plum Island. And Lyme's disease, of course, was sent out to Lyme, Connecticut. That's the name where Lyme's comes from. And that's where it began. In 1976, they tell us, right? When humans started getting infected with Lyme's disease, right off the island of Plum Island. So my point is that we're not looking at Plum Island saying Plum Island is shut down. None of us should be. They're doing other things at Plum Island with the electrical grid now that I've covered in the past, where they are doing experiments on what would happen if the grid went down at Plum Island conveniently. But they still could easily be, doing things from Plum Island, and they are. And there's many of these animal disease centers around the United States of America where they're not doing these experiments. Well, what is the excuse they give us, right? They're like, oh, we're doing experiments on an animal, right? And you're like, what? You're doing experiments on mosquitoes? What? Yeah, we're doing experiments. We need to send them out into the public because some people can't afford to get vaccinated. So we're going to put vaccines in mosquitoes and send them out on the public. And then you go, wait a minute. What, isn't human rights being violated here? What if people don't want the vaccine? Well, everybody should have it because we say they should have it. So we're going to call it a vaccine, but it's really nanotechnology. We're going to just have you get bit constantly as we create these things. And not to mention, I don't know about any of you. I'm out in the Midwest now. I don't know if any of you are seeing some of the bugs this year that are out there. Like, I've seen some bugs that I've never seen before, and I've been alive a long time. I've seen a lot of bugs. I can't name every bug, but there are clearly a ton of bugs that bite out there that are not normal bugs. They're brand new bugs, brand new species of bugs, because they're creating this brand new species of bugs. And nobody asks questions, where does that emerge from? Where are these new diseases emerging from? How are these diseases showing up all over the place, right? Well, because this is all being created by these people in laboratories. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing with our tax money. That's what they're telling you is for the betterment of humanity. These people were involved in the tech industry and then involved in the science field and the medicine field. That's the easiest way to explain it to people is what does one have to do with the other? Why are all these guys in big tech so involved on censoring speech against vaccines with Big Pharma? Why is Big Pharma and Big Tech in bed with each other? Why is Bill Gates, who supposedly founded Microsoft, whose father was on the board of Planned Parenthood, why is he involved all of a sudden with vaccines and carbon footprint and carbon vacuums to suck carbon out of the air? What are they telling everyone they need to kill their cows, right? Telling everyone we can't eat meat anymore, that we need to eat plant-based meat. I mean, it's so simple to see. And again, an important note in this video is the voluntary imprisonment, right? When people are when they say, hey, we're going to voluntarily, we're not going to mandate anything, everybody should stay inside. They know that they've trained all of these, let's just call them what they are, liberals, these Democrats who are communists. They've trained them all to shame you if you don't agree with them or go along with them. Have you seen some of the stuff that's out there? Like if a celebrity posts that they're voting for Trump, and then they all just, I'll never watch this movie again. They shame them. They go after them. I mean, it's like that with everything. Whatever the government says, they're foot soldiers for them. They'll cancel you. They'll criticize you. They'll shame you. These are the same people that if you call somebody gay, queer, they get offended. They want you thrown in prison, right? So they've trained all these people to be foot soldiers for them. And if you're in a community where they say, hey, in this community, it's voluntary, but everybody should stay inside to stop the spread, to prevent this. You just go, wait a minute, why would everybody voluntarily stay inside? If a mosquito bites one person, then, oh, what? One person's going to spread the disease to that? Oh, yeah, okay, that's what they're telling you? Are you going to question that? No, you're not? Okay, so they're telling you it's voluntary. Then when like 80% of your community who are all libs see that you're not following and they see you outside in your car at 7 o'clock looking out the windows like the little commies they are, they're going to report you to one another. Then they're going to come to your door and say, we think you should stay inside. We're upset that you're leaving the house, right? They won't even think of questioning the stories itself, connecting the dots with who's involved in these things, with the government even telling you, hey, syringe vaccines and syringe mosquitoes flying around. They'll just sit there and they'll believe it, and then they'll work as soldiers for them into shaming you into compliance. That's what's happening. So we'll keep an eye on this story. They're saying it's spreading around the United States of America. It doesn't, we don't even need like this mass thing where they push all this stuff on us, because after COVID, they've trained, again, all these people to force everybody into compliance. And if the government's not forcing you verbally into compliance, they know that these foot soldiers in your communities and your towns and your states are going to force you into it. So just another thing, we've never had a period in I don't think in human history, and this is because of technology, how connected people are to technology. Because again, you're connected to technology, right? They have access to your brain around the clock. If people, though back in the 70s and 80s, they watched TV, but they spent the majority of the day off. They weren't in front of a TV, sitting in front of the TV day. They were working, they were going out, they were interacting. Now everybody's on their phone, so they can access your mind 24/7. So that's why there's so many psyops happening at once. So they can keep pushing. And we've never seen so much stuff happening at once. Every day, there's some disease spreading, right? We got monkeypox floating around. Now we got this mosquito disease floating around. We were told Fauci has West Nile. All these things psychologically, and people said make them afraid to even go outside. All right? All this stuff is just happening. And it's all really thanks to technology. And there's your connection to Bill Gates again. These people with technology are putting people under a mass hypnosis. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless all of you as always and your families.